Check, check, check one, check two. Check, 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 check. Microphone check one, two. Good afternoon, Washington, D.C. Ladies and gentlemen, what is the biggest threat to peace today? What is the biggest threat to your way of life, to your safety? What is the biggest threat to prosperity here in the United States? What is the biggest threat to prosperity abroad? What is it that keeps you up at night? What is a danger to your families and to your children? Maybe it's not having a job. Maybe it's not having enough of a job, having to work 2 jobs, 50 hours a week, 60 hours a week. Maybe you're trying to put food on the table. Maybe you're afraid that your kid's school isn't very good. Every year it seems like the teachers have less and less money for supplies, less and less money for books. The rooms are falling apart, the carpeting needs upkeep. They got trailers in the back, unhealthy lunches in the cafeteria. Maybe you're concerned about roads here in DC or in your town. I'm concerned about roads. Norfolk, Virginia has some of the worst roads in the country. And that's some stiff competition. Maybe you're concerned about collapsing infrastructure. Maybe you're concerned about a bridge in Baltimore that just fell down, which will probably cause traffic backups in the area for years. Maybe you're concerned about immigrants pouring across the southern border. Maybe you're concerned about immigrants bringing cheap labor that's driving down wages for you and your loved ones. Maybe you're concerned that your company is having another round of layoffs. Maybe you're concerned that a hospital in your small town closed down because they couldn't make enough profits for huge health insurance companies. Maybe you're concerned that the doctor at your hospital is overworked. He spends more than 50% of his time filling out paperwork. Maybe you're concerned about climate change, global warming, escalating temperatures, melting ice caps, rising floods, disasters, fires in California. Maybe you're concerned about our collapsing energy infrastructure. Maybe like me, you were in a freak winter storm in Texas in 2021, where 200 people died in the richest country in the world, in a kind of a winter storm. Maybe you're concerned about all these things. Maybe you're concerned you don't have health care. Maybe you're concerned your job isn't providing you with enough insurance. Maybe you don't work 35 hours or 40 hours. Maybe you recently tried to file a claim and your health insurance company denied it. Why would they deny it? Because they make more profits denying it than paying for your care. Maybe you're concerned about all these things and more. You're concerned about jobs. You're concerned about medicine. You're concerned about the skyrocketing prices of food and gas in this country. Here in DC, gas is $4.50 or more a gallon. In California, it's $6 or more. Eggs can be $5 a dozen. Everywhere you look, prices are going up. Well, so you have all of our politicians from across the country and across the world, European elite politicians here, politicians from Kenya, politicians from South Korea, politicians from Australia and Canada, all over the world gathered here. Are they gathered here to address your concerns, your fears, the things that keep you up at night? No, they're not. Because what do they tell you you should be afraid of? What do they tell you is the main danger to your way of life? They tell you that Russia is your main enemy. They tell you that Iran is your main enemy. They tell you that North Korea and China are your main enemy. That's what you should be afraid of. They tell you that Russia is driving down your way of life, causing energy prices to rise. And what do these political elites say is the only solution for us? The NATO alliance, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. You got to make more money for NATO. $130 billion a year we spend on the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, just here in the United States. And all our member states in Europe have to spend 2% or more of their GDP. And what does NATO do? Does NATO provide lower prices on eggs or gas? No, quite the contrary. Is NATO building schools in your neighborhood? No. Is NATO fixing roads? No. What is NATO doing? Driving us closer and closer to World War III in Europe. Driving us closer and closer to a nuclear war with Russia. That's what NATO is doing. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization. It's the North Atlantic Terrorist Organization. NATO illegally bombed Yugoslavia in the 90s. NATO illegally bombed Libya. NATO was illegally occupying Afghanistan and Iraq. And NATO has been pushing us closer and closer to World War III with Russia since 1997. Western leaders promised Soviet leaders that NATO would never expand past the borders of Germany, but they did. They expanded in 1997 and they expanded again in 2004. And here's something that our NATO leaders don't want you to know. Here's something they won't tell you on MSNBC or the nightly news. NATO is supposedly a peaceful organization, a defensive organization. Well, guess what? The leader of Russia, Vladimir Putin, wanted to join NATO in the year 2000. He asked outgoing President Bill Clinton, hey, Bill, if the U.S. and NATO is serious about peace, why not let the other main nuclear superpower into the alliance? Wouldn't that make sense? Wouldn't it make sense to have both of the nuclear superpowers on either side of the Atlantic be part of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization? And to his credit, Bill said he'd think about it. Bill Clinton said he'd think about it. I mean, he had spent the previous year bombing the stuffing out of Serbia, killing over 500 civilians, killing 3 Chinese civilians at the Chinese embassy in Belgrade, destroying bridges, destroying state-owned car factories, tobacco factories in Serbia. That's what NATO did. That's what NATO did in a country that posed no threat to American citizens. So it's no wonder these politicians have no solutions for us when gas is $4.55 a gallon, eggs are $5 a dozen, rising prices, everything is more expensive, quality is less. So Putin asked President Bill Clinton in 2000, why doesn't Russia join NATO? It just makes sense. If this is a peaceful organization, let's have peace on the European continent. Well, Bill said he'd think about it. But it seems like that day Bill had a little meeting with some of his Democratic Party donors. And so when Bill got back to Putin later on that night, he said, you know, I just don't think it's going to happen. I just don't think it's going to happen. Well, then why wouldn't it happen? Because who donates money to the Democratic Party and the Republican parties? The same organizations that are making profits off of these endless wars. I'm talking about Raytheon, I'm talking about Northrop Grumman, I'm talking about Lockheed Martin, I'm talking about General Dynamics, I'm talking about BAE. All these companies in Northern Virginia and around here that have shiny new office buildings. And I get it, we all work for them, they're providing jobs for us. Well, hey, don't we need jobs? Rebuilding America, building bridges here in the United States? Don't our teachers need fair wages? Why are teachers paying for pencils when we send tens of billions of dollars to a fascist regime in Ukraine? So Bill Clinton told Vladimir Putin, nope, sorry, we can't be in an alliance with Russia. Because that would take away the boogeyman that they use to scare American citizens. They don't want you to be concerned about rising gas prices, food prices, decreasing jobs, decreasing way of life, faltering infrastructure. No, they want you to be scared of Russia. But Russia wanted to be in NATO. Putin wanted peace. He put peace on the table. Putin put peace on the table with Bill Clinton. But Bill Clinton shut it down. Why? Because the Democratic Party relies on campaign contributions from the companies that rely on these endless wars. Raytheon, Northrop Grumman, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, General Dynamics, BAE. These companies make huge profits off of endless wars that are driving us to nuclear war. That are driving us towards nuclear war. We are closer to a nuclear war than we've been since the Cuban Missile Crisis. Possibly closer. It could be any false step. So why won't the NATO organizations come to the table with Russia? Putin has said over and over again he wants peace. Look at the Russian State Department website and compare it with the U.S. State Department website. Watch Tucker Carlson's interview with Putin. Putin over and over has put peace on the table. Oh, but American leaders say, oh no, he wants to recreate the Soviet Union. He wants to imperialize all of Europe. He just wants to expand more and more. But they don't tell you about the provocations of NATO in Ukraine. They don't tell you about the heroic war that Eastern Ukrainian citizens were fighting for 8 years, getting slaughtered by a fascist Kiev regime. And now these brave heroes are being destroyed with American-made weapons. Weapons that are being used to destroy schools in Ukraine. Say made in America on them. Made by Raytheon, made by Lockheed Martin, made by Northrop Grumman. This is what your tax dollars are supporting. This is why the elites from Europe and your politicians are meeting here this week. This is what they're discussing while our infrastructure is dilapidated. While teachers don't have wages, while hospitals are closing down. While my colleagues can't get a job. Hundreds of my peers have been unemployed for months or longer in a cycle of constant layoffs. While our political elites have nothing better to do than figure out how they can funnel more of our tax dollars into endless wars. But the heroes in Ukraine that they want you to forget about or ignore are fighting for freedom. And they know this war did not start on February 24th of 2022. No! They know that. Russian citizens know that. But American news agencies want you to forget about an 8-year civil war in Ukraine that killed 16,000 citizens in Ukraine. That killed 168 children in Donetsk. 61 children in Lugansk. Children, civilians, killed by the fascist Kiev regime and increasingly killed with American-made weapons. 7 civilians in Sevastopol and Crimea were killed with American-made bombs. Just 3 weeks ago. Is this what you want your tax dollars supporting? $130 billion a year America spends on the NATO alliance. $130 billion a year. That could be more than $2 billion a year for every state. What could your state do with $2 billion a year? What could your town do with $50 million? Costs about $10 million to build a school, a great school, an up-to-date school with high-speed internet. But no, they spend $130 billion on endless war, increasingly nuclear-agitated war. We're closer to nuclear war than we've been since the Cuban Missile Crisis. And these politicians are meeting in D.C. this week to see how we can do more of it. How can we do more war in China? It's not enough to have a potentially nuclear war with Russia and also a potentially nuclear war in Palestine. Or maybe that's a dirty little secret that you weren't quite hip to just yet. That yes, Israel has nuclear weapons, that even as of late, Israeli politicians are admitting as such. admitting as such, even though they're not partner to the nuclear treaties that they were required by law to be a partner to, if they do have nuclear weapons, which Israel does. So they're in flagrant violation of international nuclear treaties while driving us closer and closer to nuclear war with this genocide in Gaza. Lancet medical report indicates that as many as 180,000 people could have been killed or more. And many of them with American-made weapons. A huge percentage in Gaza being killed with American-made weapons, American-made bombs. And American politicians signed these bombs. I received in my mailbox the other day a letter from Joe Biden saying, "Jonathan, let's finish the job." Is this a joke? These politicians are laughing at you. They are spitting on American citizens as they kill citizens abroad. They kill citizens in Ukraine and Gaza. And they want to kill citizens in China. They want to get brave Taiwanese citizens killed. Just like the brave Donbass patriots have been getting killed for this endless war machine. For the profits of Raytheon, General Dynamics, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, Boeing, BAE, and all these multitudes of contractors that are here in DC, in Northern Virginia, in cities all over the United States. And meanwhile, our country's falling apart. We got a fentanyl epidemic, 100,000 drug overdoses last year. We got 3 million, maybe as many as 6 million Americans unemployed, underemployed. Millions working 2 jobs, still struggling to put food on the table. While we spend billions of dollars on war, why? Why? You know it's wrong. But we got to organize. We got to get together if we know it's wrong. We got to stand up against this system. That's why we here at the World Anti-Imperialist Platform, we stand with the brave patriots of the Donbass. We stand with the Palestinians who are struggling for their freedom. We don't want a war in China. We don't want a war in the Taiwan Strait. Oh, mark my words, that's coming. Pentagon officials have basically promised that that's coming in 2025, a war in the Taiwan Strait, even though they know they can't win. But why? Because of the profits of this imperial regime that has no off switch, no reverse gear. Because they make the profits, they reinvest the profits in making more profits, and they got to make more. They can't make less. Most of y'all work for some company that's trying to make profits. What are your sales targets? 3% a quarter? 6% a year? What happens if you don't make your sales targets? You get fired, you get laid off, you get less resources. You get eaten up by a larger corporation. Well, what do Raytheon and Lockheed Martin need to do to make their sales targets? They need to sell more weapons, and you're paying for them. We're paying for them here in America. $130 billion on the pointless NATO alliance that should have been disbanded in 1991. We were promised a peace dividend. We were promised a peace dividend. What did we get? It's 33 years later. We've been occupying the Middle East for over 2 decades. Serbia was bombed for 78 days in 1999. Libya, destroyed. Libya's a failed state. It was the most prosperous country in Africa. It's been destroyed. Now we're inching towards nuclear war in Russia, potential nuclear war in the Middle East, vis-a-vis this disaster in Israel and Palestine. And our politicians are gathered here from the United States and all over the world to figure out how we can do more of it. Spend more of your hard-earned tax dollars on more war while offering you nothing, literally laughing at you. Joe Biden sending me mail saying, let's finish the job. Let's finish the job, Joe. What job do you want to finish, Joe? And they support it. These organizations that are supposed to be for labor rights. They support Joe. They support the next Republican. They support this imperialist state that at the end of the day is doing nothing for American citizens, pushing us into constant wars. We were promised a peace dividend in 1991. NATO was made defunct. And you know who knew it was defunct? Joe Biden. Joe Biden stood in the halls of Congress in 1992, 1993. And he said NATO needs a purpose now. Why does NATO need a purpose? How about a peaceful purpose? How about a purpose of building bridges in your cities? How about a purpose of rebuilding our amazing education system? About relieving American students of $2 trillion of student debt? How about that purpose? No, but Joe Biden says that NATO, an organization that does nothing but profit off of endless wars, funnel your tax money into the hands of Raytheon executives, Northrop Grumman executives, Lockheed Martin executives. They're eating well, they're living in mansions, they're taking nice vacations. What about American citizens? What does Joe Biden have for hardworking American citizens? Nothing. What do Democrats have for hardworking American citizens? Nothing. Republicans, nothing. And they distract us with these culture wars. They distract us with ideological debates about gender or immigration, try to pump us up with racist tropes and all these foolish distractions. Don't fall for it, Americans. The enemy here is NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. That is our enemy, because we spend $130 billion on it. It does not make us safe. Does not make us safe. It's edging us toward nuclear war in Russia, and it'll be edging us towards another nuclear war against China by the end of next year. It doesn't make us safe. It wastes our money and our resources on bombs and tanks that just go overseas and get blown up. For what? What is it doing for you here at home? An eggs are $5 a dozen. Gas is $4.50 a gallon. In California, $6 or $7 a gallon. Teachers are paying for their own supplies. People are working 2 jobs, deciding, do I want food for my kids or medicine for my kids? And your politicians are here in D.C. doing what? Fuck! Frig Joe Biden. They want nothing for you. They just want endless profits for the war machine. We sent $200 billion to a fascist regime in Kiev. Literal fascist regime that has banned opposition political parties. Zelensky no longer has any mandate to lead. He abandoned the election. 2 teenagers have been on house arrest for almost 2 years now. This regime slaughtered 16,000 citizens in the Donbass. 500,000 Ukrainian men have been sacrificed to this war, killed or otherwise incapacitated. 500,000 Ukrainian men. And so what's NATO doing? They're trying to figure out how to amp it up. By the way, you know they changed the law about selective service. It's no longer, quote, voluntary. You have to sign up on your own. It's automatic. And in UK, they're trying to resurrect the draft. In the United Kingdom, we want to resurrect the draft. To fight who? To fight what? Putin wants peace. He said over and over he wants peace. Xi Jinping wants peace. The people of Palestine want peace. Iran wants peace. You know who doesn't want peace? These politicians that are here in town figuring out how to spend billions and more of your dollars on endless war, and the military contractors that they support and stand for and do the bidding of. Raytheon, Northrop Grumman, Lockheed Martin. That help prop up this decrepit, get on. Hamas is the boogeyman. Iran is the boogeyman. China is the boogeyman. China never did anything to me. What has Xi Jinping ever done to me or any American citizen? All China's done is make just about everything I use for dirt cheap. They probably made this flag. Disband NATO!
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 Free, free Palestine!
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 Disband NATO!
Disband NATO!
We Americans want peace, we want jobs, we want infrastructure, we want healthcare, we do not want endless wars. Tell your politicians we won't stand for it. Organize in your communities to break the back of this decrepit warmongering imperialist system. Join us at the World Anti-Imperialist Forum. Disband NATO!
Disband NATO!
I'm here today as a patriot of my country, Quebec. I'm here to protest against the terrorist organization known as NATO, who now seeks to expand its reach to Asia. I am protesting because I don't want to see my people annihilated in a nuclear war. While imperialist propaganda portrays NATO as a symbol of peace and democracy, the vast majority of the peoples of the world know the truth. NATO only brings death and misery to the world. It brought hell to Korea. It brought hell to Yugoslavia. It brought hell to Libya. And it's gonna bring hell to anyone who dares stand in its way. NATO does not exist to defend the people of Western countries. It exists to defend the strategic interest of a privileged few, their interest of big capital. Some will say that NATO needs to be in Ukraine to stop the so-called tyrant Putin. But how is pushing NATO further into the east, which is what started the problem to begin with, gonna solve anything? Some will say that NATO needs to expand to Asia to face North Korea, who are supposedly a war-hungry dictatorship. But it's not the North Koreans who have blown the Middle East and Yugoslavia to bits. It's not North Korea who does military exercise at the US border. It is the Americans who occupy the south of Korea with their troops and constantly threaten North Korea at its borders. This obsession of NATO to intervene in all conflicts is going to push the world toward a nuclear war. The people in the West need to demand the end of their imperialist policies of the government. They need to demand that their government leave NATO. And if their governments refuse to listen, it only means one thing, that the people in imperialist countries do not have any sovereignty over their own country. They do not possess genuine independence. Their country is under control of a class of parasites who do not care about their nation and people. Their only homeland is profit. The struggle for national independence of the oppressed nation is directly related to the struggle for sovereignty of the working masses in the imperialist countries. True freedom and liberty lies in the unity of the struggle of the working class and a movement for national liberation in colonized nations. A nation that oppresses another cannot be free. As a patriot, I understand that the liberation of my homeland cannot be fully accomplished in its truest form as long as Palestine is occupied, as long as Korea is divided, as long as the working masses of the world have not seized what is theirs to take. This is why I'm here today. For this dream to be realized, we need to get rid of NATO, to get rid of imperialism once and for all. Disband NATO!
Disband NATO!
Disband NATO!
Disband NATO!
Disband NATO!
Disband NATO!
Free, free Palestine!
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 From the river to the sea!
Palestine will be free!
From the river to the sea!
Palestine will be free!
From the river to the sea!
Palestine will be free!
Thank you. Okay.
Today, we in the World Anti-Imperialist Platform stand united in protesting against the NATO Summit currently taking place right here in Washington, D.C. In fact, right behind us. We have rallied here for 3 days in scorching hot D.C. weather because we truly believe in this. We are standing here because we oppose, to the fullest possible extent, NATO's drive to drag the entire world into a nuclear Armageddon and use people like us as cannon fodder. We are also standing here because we have not and will not forget the unspeakable crimes that NATO has committed in the past. We will never forgive or forget what NATO did to the Serbian people in 1999. How NATO ruthlessly bombed Serbia for 3 months based on a pack of lies, intentionally targeting civilians, and civilians forget or forgive what NATO did to the people of Libya. Libya, under the leadership of Gaddafi, was the richest and most successful country on the African continent. And NATO bombed them, once again, based on a pack of lies, and removed their leader, turning Libya into a country where a massive slave market exists, and their people are drowning in the Mediterranean Sea trying to escape this disaster. We also won't forget or forgive what NATO did to Afghanistan, and how they not only supported, but actively funded a genocide in Yemen by the Saudi Arabians. Today, the imperialist NATO bloc seeks to repeat these crimes in Eastern Europe, in the Middle East, in the Indo-Pacific, and in the Korean Peninsula. In Eastern Europe, NATO countries seek to funnel billions of dollars and military equipment to the banderites in Ukraine. Many of these NATO countries, like France, Germany, the United Kingdom, are pushing for direct military involvement on the part of NATO in the conflict in order to set the stage for an all-out war with Russia and to fulfill NATO's goal of the destruction and balkanization of Russia. In the Middle East, the NATO bloc seeks to support the fascist Israeli regime as it utterly horrifies the world in committing the most unspeakable atrocities against the Palestinians, many of whom are children who cannot defend themselves. In the Indo-Pacific region, NATO seeks to prop up the Taiwanese separatists and give them loads of Javelin missiles in order to set the stage for war and destruction of People's China. And on the Korean Peninsula, NATO seeks to destroy the People's Government in the north by stationing approximately 30,000 American troops in the southern half, who conduct numerous provocative military exercises, including running up to the North Korean border and stopping and then repeating, supporting the remilitarization of Japan, Korea's former colonizer, and create an East Asian version of NATO, including Japan, which colonized Korea. We are here to struggle against the imperialist NATO bloc's drive to war on all 4 of those fronts. We also understand that if a war breaks out on any of these fronts, those who will fight the war will not be the globalists who cheered for it. It'll be ordinary people like us, people our age, who are sent off to our deaths. So, our presence here should send a clear and powerful message to NATO that we will never accept being used as cannon fodder for the benefit of multi-billion-dollar corporations, weapons manufacturers, and globalists in Brussels, Tel Aviv, or just a mere 2 miles from here on Capitol Hill. We will not rest until NATO is disbanded and their plans for global Armageddon are cut short. And we won't stop until we have created the world that we have dreamed of. A world free of imperialism, exploitation, and war. And that is why we say, disband NATO!
Disband NATO!
Disband NATO!
Disband NATO!
Disband NATO!
Disband NATO!
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.